Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our 42nd President.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Well, first of all, I have one more thing to be grateful to Joe Sestak for. He gave me another reason to come back to Scranton, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you. Senator Casey, thank you for being here, for your leadership, and for your support for Joe. Susan and Alex, thank you for meeting me. Alex, I talked to your dad a couple hours ago when I was racing over here from New York and trying not to violate the speed limit. And I told them how grateful I was that both of you would be here, and he ought to be back in Washington today because I'm sure Senator Casey already said that, but the Republicans in the Senate delayed a vote on this bill, which will enable us literally to keep hundreds of thousands of teachers in the classroom all over America. And if you weren't there, you know, Pennsylvania, and particularly this part of Pennsylvania, is very special to Hillary and to me, and probably the only reason I'm here today is that the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense are the only two members of the President's cabinet that cannot participate in politics. But I did get a call last night instructing me that I was to give a good speech for Joe Sestak. I'm very grateful to you, and I understand what's going on. So let's just cut the bull and get down to the meat of the coconut here. Everybody knows that this is supposed to be a tough year for any Democrat running for office. And the reason is obvious. For most rank and file working families, things don't feel better than they did the day President Obama took the oath of office. We don't have enough jobs, and therefore people are working harder and not getting a pay raise, and they're having a harder time paying their bills. Then there's the problem of the disaffected independents who are doing okay economically, but they're worried about the country, and they're worried about all this debt, and they think maybe there's been a little bit too much government activity, so we're dealing with that. And so the Republicans are saying they had a year and a half to fix the mess we left them, so put us back in. That's basically their argument. Now, I want to talk to you about that, and it's not going to be a traditional political speech because I figure you're already going to vote for Joe Sestak or you wouldn't be here. So, and I'm not running for anything, so I'm not big on preaching to the saved. I want to talk to you about what I want you to say to other people here and throughout Pennsylvania. Because this is it's a complicated decision for the average person that doesn't go to political rallies and doesn't have time to think about politics, and they're really hurting. So here's what I think. First of all, we need people in office that, as Susan said, are not just ideological, but actually look at the facts and try to figure out something to do. Joe Sestak spent most of his career in the United States Navy, and he was given jobs to do. As he said, the first job he had in the Navy probably is more relevant to what he's had to do the last year or so than all the admiral jobs he had. The first job he had was to figure out how to minimize the impact of all the mistakes that were made. And that's basically what he's had to do for the last year and a half. Now, here's what I know about it. The Pentagon picked him of all the officers of his rank in the entire military, not just in the Navy, to assign to the National Security Council to work for the President on national security matters in my first term. It had nothing to do with the fact that I was a Democrat. They had no idea if he had any politics. They picked him because they thought of all the people of his rank that every 4 years they sent somebody over there. Maybe there's a 3-year rotation. They thought he was the best person in the entire military to come in and do that, to help me think through these problems for American security and solve them. And I think that's a pretty important. Obviously, I had no prior contact with him before he came to work in the White House. Clearly, it had nothing to do with my campaign for president in 1992. He was in the military and couldn't. But I knew enough to know that he was invaluable while he was there. Because I came in, I'd been a governor, I knew what I was supposed to do on the economy. I had a lot to learn in national security, and thanks to Joe Sestak, I learned a lot in a short time, and we did a pretty good job of protecting America and promoting peace. By my second term, when we knew that Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda were the #1 security threat to the United States, Joe had a field command in the Navy, a fleet command, and he was responsible for the attack I launched from the Al-Qaeda training camps in an attempt to get Osama bin Laden, which is still, as far as we know, the closest we ever came to getting him, and we would have done it had he not been warned off by somebody else. So, I obviously have a lot of confidence in him because I've seen him do things to protect you and your children and your future. But let's talk about the economy. It is true that the average person doesn't feel better today, but let's go back and look at how we got here. Not because I'm playing a blame game. I'm not interested in that. People only hire Democrats, if you think about it, when the country's in a mess. Isn't that true? I mean, you go all the way back to 1968. Go back to 1968, when the country came apart over the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, the Women's Movement, all the stuff that was going on. Ever since then, when things are going along pretty well, they don't really hire Republicans, they just like to hear them talk. And doesn't seem to have much consequence. When the country's in a mess, Jimmy Carter got elected after Watergate. I got elected when there was a terrible economic problem. President Obama got elected when there was a terrible economic problem, right? So they hire us to fix things, to win for America. So since that's how come they hire us, when people don't feel like they're winning, we're at risk. I accept that. But let me talk to you. I hope I have a little credibility on the economy and these deficits. I've presented 8 budgets to the Congress. 4 of them were in surplus. We paid $600 billion down on the national debt. And if President Bush and the Republican Congress had not reversed my economic policy and gone right back to the one they were pursuing before, we would be completely out of debt as a country in about 4 years. And I think that's worth pointing out. And it worked. So a lot of Republicans said, yeah, but look at Obama. He's increased the deficit. Oh, blah, blah, blah. You hear all that. But let me tell you something. When he took office, he had a different problem than I did. We had a recession and no jobs because money was tight and interest rates were too high and people couldn't get credit to invest in their businesses and grow. So I could go right after the deficit. And I made a big gamble that if we cut that deficit, it would drive interest rates down enough that the spigot would open and the private sector would create jobs. 92% of the jobs that were created when I was president were private sector jobs, the highest percentage in 70 years. And I'm proud of that. But it was a different problem. When the Congress was elected, the Democrats in 2006, and President Obama was elected in 2008, we had a different problem. The problem there was the economy itself was shrinking. And it's not a good thing to raise taxes or cut spending in a shrinking economy. It makes it shrink faster. So he passed this stimulus bill. First thing, I would have voted for it. Here's why. And then people say, has it fixed the economy? No, it hasn't. But it kept it from getting worse. And everybody's forgotten this. The reason it hasn't created enough jobs is that stimulus only had a third of the money devoted to creating new jobs. Don't forget that. A third of the stimulus went to provide tax cuts to working families on very modest incomes so they could keep going to the grocery store. Let's not forget that. To keep the local grocery stores and local dry cleaning establishments and local houses very important. A third of that stimulus was strictly doing what Joe Sestak's doing today. It was aid to state and local governments to keep the state and local governments from having to face the awful choice of raising taxes while people were being thrown out of work, which is a bad idea, or throwing 1 million teachers and public health workers out of work across this country, which would have made it worse. It stopped that. Only a third of it was devoted to creating new jobs. Road projects, water projects, sewer projects, bridge projects, and new clean energy projects, and every single independent audit has shown that it created more jobs than it was estimated to create. Then there's all this brouhaha about the financial bailout. I get why people were mad about that. They say, oh, they bailed these banks out and I don't have my bailout. But they weren't trying to bail the banks out. There's a reason why Senator Obama and Senator Clinton and Senator McCain all voted for that first bill, not because they wanted to help Wall Street, they didn't give a rip about it. Even whatever you think about John McCain, he was running for president. He didn't want to get that on there. They did it because 3 days before that bailout passed, the biggest car dealer in America had stopped financing cars. We were about to the point where I lived for so many years before I was president in Arkansas, nobody could go down to Sears and finance a refrigerator on an installment plan. The whole thing was about to collapse. That's why they did it. They didn't give a rip about the big banks. They had to try to keep the system going and figure out how to rebuild it. And President Obama put more standards in there so that now you're actually going to make a profit out of that TARP program. When they pay back with interest, now you're going to wind up making more money than you put out. And I think so, now, did all this increase the deficit? It did. It did, and it got added to the national debt. But unlike what was done before I became president and after I left, a lot of this money is one-time spending, and what it has added to the deficit will vanish as soon as economic growth returns.